Boy, a week's a long time. That's all. That's the end of the statement, I guess. It's true. It is true. A week is a long time. 7 days at least. Hey, we're glad you're back. We're geared up today. We've had a really interesting conversations in the green room that we didn't record. We should have recorded them. Lesson learned. I'm just going to start hitting the record button. No, I'm not. I've just made an executive decision. I'm not going to do that.
We appreciate you not doing that.
Yes, I've had some flashbacks, and I was like, nope. We have enough trouble without other people coming to us saying, you said that? Yeah. Welcome back to Michael Kuntz across the table from me.
Hey, Jackson.
That's the end of that, too. You came back, and I'm glad.
And I'm glad.
Glutton.
Glutton for, whatever this is. Jason Riccardi, also across the table.
Yeah.
You might have noticed, if you paid attention a few weeks ago on Mike the Baptist with the three preachers, across the table there are two close-ups on the video and it was Jason and Kuntz sitting where they are today, and if they look at each other with us in this split screen of all four of us, they're actually looking at each other on the screen. But that particular day, in setting up for Mike the Baptist that morning, I had Kuntz's camera reversed. And you couldn't really tell it, except every time Jason would start talking, Kuntz would look away. Like this, real conceited,
That's
arrogant,
awesome.
like, I'm not even listening to you. It was so hilarious. I don't know how many of you might have noticed it.
You
That's
would
a good
fit in
reason
with
to
my
go back.
students on Wednesday night. Yes.
Yes, I would.
Was that his disdain for Jason always being correct on any rowdy? Yeah, we're not even looking at you.
Yes.
We're done with this show.
That's salt in the wound. Well,
You're bringing this up like several weeks later.
I'm bringing it up. Well, I get confused about, I just get confused. But either way, you were a big winner. But I'm saying that now because I predict you're going to fall hard at some point.
I believe I will. I was surprised that I didn't the last time.
Yeah, because you were a little. It's the first time I'd seen you real iffy about something, but you held your ground. So I was impressed that you were. I
was very lucky. It could have gone either way.
I'll just tell you, there's a little luck involved with some of this idiotic because we're finding out ourselves here that once you run out of the short list of the first 10 or 12,
Google search that
on the
everybody
Google
has access to.
Yes, once you run out of those, you got to start
deeper.
scratching. But then all of a sudden, it's very interesting what's in there that you just didn't really notice before. H.D. Jones is also with us.
Good to be back.
Didn't mean to look you over.
That's good, man.
We got involved in the conversation there across the table, and
It's interesting stuff.
good to see you back. And thanks for pandering to that and saying that it was that interesting because it's it is. It really is. If you're listening or watching, we're glad you're there too, and we'd like to know your name because we're just said all of our names. Send us your names to Mike. Send us your name, your comments. If you have a question for anybody that ever shows
Your credit
up on
card
here,
number.
your card numbers, anything you'd like to send, we have an email address, comments@mikethebaptist.com. You can type up an email, a good old-fashioned email. I guess email's old-fashioned now, isn't it? Has it been around long enough?
Kids don't use it anymore.
It's old-fashioned. Yep. Well, we don't have a number that we were going to give you so you can text us directly.
No kids are listening to this program.
Probably not. Probably not. If you are a kid and you're listening, send us your comment to comments@mikethebaptist.com.
Or have your parents email us.
Now, what would even be better is send us a comment that says, "I'm not listening." My grandson, over this past weekend, we were sitting around. We have a text chain that's my two grandchildren, my daughter, my son, my wife, and myself. And we're just constantly texting, things here and there. And somebody thinks something, they text it, and we send pictures back and forth. Well, we're sitting there a day or two ago over the weekend, and my grandson, Ave, sends a text, and he didn't direct it to anyone. He texted, "I've lost my phone. Can somebody call it? So his grandmother, being the kind soul she is, immediately called to help him find his phone. But anyway, the long story short, we don't know who he was trying to pull this over on. I think he's actually trying to do it to his sister.
How did he send a text message saying he lost his phone?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think he was trying to pull one over on his sister, but he caught his grandma. So she called him.
How old is he now?
He's 13. He just turned into a teenager.
Wow.
That's just insane.
That's crazy.
That's insane. And he's a good teenager. He's a really good one. They're both
Give it
good
time.
kids. Yeah. Well, you know.
You were
did.
one once. Just
I
remember.
wore one once too. So anyway, hey, you know, since we're already joshing around and kind of talking like we're on a front porch, we'll move into the front porch section of today's program, which may be interesting if I can get the right kind of information out of you guys. I want us to share. It's a two-part thing I want you to share, and it's all based around your experiences in church when you were young. I'm real young, not teenage. I prefer you go back even farther in your memory. But so what I'd like for you to share with everybody is one of your favorite food items that always showed up at potluck dinners. That some little old lady or some hermit old man or somebody would bring to those potlucks, or just a food item that stands out in your mind from potlucks.
Okay.
The second thing I want you to share is your memory of a unique individual that you remember from church when you were young.
Oh, no.
The funnier,
Oh,
the
no.
better.
I'm going to get in trouble here.
That's fine.
Wow.
Just don't use names unless you have to. But I will start to show you what I'm looking for, kind of. My food thing is actually kind of a two-part. One is I was frightened by some things that showed up at potlucks. There were some casserole dishes that had colors of meats and gravies and things that just they look frightening. And like, you know, the older people in front of me, I can remember people dipping things with a spoon out of some of those dishes, and the stuff that dripped off the spoon kind of made you, it was confusing. I have that, but the one thing that sticks out in my head from potlucks, every time I think of the word potluck, I think of deviled eggs. The churches I went to when I was young, if there was a potluck, there was a dozen different assortments of deviled eggs at every one of them. And I can still remember that smell, the taste of some that was just so good, and then it was so good that you were willing to try the next one that was just horrible. So,
are you allowed to have deviled eggs at a church potluck?
Yes,
always wondered
and it was a Pentecostal church.
How do you mess up deviled eggs?
You can mess up a deviled egg. Let me tell you, you put the wrong stuff in that yellow part and stir it in there, you can mess it up.
Okay.
If it ain't got the right amount of dill and mustard and stuff in there,
Okay.
let me just tell you, I have bad memories of getting the wrong plate, getting one off the wrong plate. It's bad. Okay, so that's my food recollection. I have this memory of a little old lady, small old lady, that one church always asked to play the piano for the offertory. I don't remember her ever playing the piano for anything else, but she always played for the offertory. Her name was Louise Hollaball. I remember the name, Louise Hollaball.
That would stick with you.
It does. Now, you know, if anyone in my home area is hearing this and remembers Louise Hollaball, let me just say, first of all, I'm 62, and some of my memories aren't exactly vivid, so I may get part of this wrong, but what I remember is Louise would play these incredibly ornate, I don't know if that's a word for a piano medley, ornate melodies that were incredibly slow. And so slow, it feels like in my memory that I was kind of leaning forward, waiting on the next note on some of them. And they would take up the offering, and she would continue playing. And then at the ending, it seemed like she would always end these songs. You know how some songs they end, they go da ba da da, something like that. Louise Hollabaugh would make it go bling, 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 bling. It's like she was going to go off the end of the keyboard playing these notes. Anyway, that's my memory of that. I didn't know her. I'm sure she was a great, sweet old lady. I just remember thinking, man, that piano thing is just like, I didn't know there were that many keys on the end of a piano just going out of sight.
You don't hear those very often, do you?
What's that?
Those keys.
You know you don't. Those way up on the end there, you don't. Well, God bless Louise Hollabaugh for playing them. Okay.
Should be a challenge for Neil. I know he'll listen to this. Play on the ends of the keyboard every now and then, right?
Yeah, get them keys all the way out there on the
There
end.
was a famous composer, and I can't remember which one it is. Beethoven, I'm thinking in my head, but
You're probably right, Mr. Genius. I'm not voting.
Yeah,
he was famous. He had this one thing where he was playing, and it was on this end of the piano, and he actually had a stick in his mouth, and he would be playing on this end of the piano, and he would do that number to hit the other end of the piano. So because the probability of moving from one end to the other
right.
in the time that was necessary was impossible. So that was how he actually wrote and composed this, and he would hit that note with his.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jerry Lee Lewis just did it with his foot.
Yeah.
After he kicked the bench out of the way, right?
Yep, set on fire.
So what was the questions again? We're supposed to be talking about food,
Yes,
Food.
and then what else? And then some memorable character.
Yes,
All
that
right.
you remember as you were young. Now, when you get older, you remember people for different reasons. But I'm thinking about those things that don't frighten you, but they're in your head. They're just in your psyche, and you just. Kuntz? Do you have? Are you ready?
Sure. Yeah, I can go for it. So potluck meals. The church I was at when I was little, it was. I don't remember a whole lot of the potlucks. Of course, you had. It is a very big church, and there was hundreds and hundreds of dishes that were always laid out. So what I was thinking about on this one was what we would do every Sunday afternoon at church is we'd always have our choir practice. So we had the children, the youth choir practices, the adult choir practices, and between choir practice and training union time, they would feed us, all the kids and the teenagers, and we would have hamburgers every Sunday. But the hamburgers, we had this couple in the church, and they would come in every Sunday, and they would cook hundreds of hamburgers for all the kids that were there for choir practice. So it would take a while to cook all those. I had big kitchen and stuff, but they would take these hamburgers and they'd smash them. They were super thin little burgers, put them on the buns, put the pickles on there, and then they'd put them back in the wrapper that the buns came out of. So when we would come down to eat, just tons of hamburgers were down there. They were never soggy though. They weren't bad. They were delicious. They were really good. And if you weren't a teenager yet, so if you were in the children's grades, they would always, I don't know how they did this, they would bring in the drink that they would serve kids at McDonald's. It's like a Kool-Aid orange drink.
Yep.
And we'd had the dispensers from McDonald's that we would, all the kids would get to drink that. But then when you got to be a teenager, you got the Pepsis and the Mountain Dews and the glass bottles. So that was always a big hit to me anyway. I love that. I can still taste those burgers. It's just, and smell the way the whole church would smell from cooking all of that stuff.
Neat.
So that was good stuff. As far as a memorable person, and this ain't really a funny story, but he was a very memorable individual. I know I shared this at a coffee time not too long ago, but it was a gentleman. His name was Tub Effinger, and Tub was a veteran.
Tub Effinger.
Tub.
I'd like to know a Tub Effinger.
Yes, you'd love to have known Tub. And Tub was a veteran from Vietnam. And I know Dad and our family were close with the Effingers and stuff throughout my life. So we'd go out to their houses and hang out and stuff. And Dad got to hear a lot of stories and things about Tub, but I never heard much about his time in Vietnam. And there's actually a tribute that was put out about him a few weeks ago, because it had been 4 years since Tub died, and it explained what Tub did during Vietnam. He was in with the Special Forces guys. It was a very clandestine operation group that he served with. It was incredible to read this stuff about him. But as a kid, it all makes sense. When we were in Royal Ambassadors as a kid, Tub was this huge fella. I mean, I would put him up against like a Hulk Hogan type guy. He was just big. I mean, strong. When you shook his hand, you knew he was a strong individual. But there was great respect for Tub. You know, he had that deep voice of like a Marine drill instructor. And usually when he spoke, people would do what he said. But of course, in Royal Ambassadors, we were dealing with a lot of brats and stuff that would come in there. And so one of Tubbs' forms of discipline was when you disobeyed, he would take a piece of chalk, draw a circle on the wall. You had to put your nose in that circle and stand there until he told you otherwise. But then the circle would be just high enough that you had to stand on your tippy toes the whole time. So I never got in trouble. I never had to do that. I was a good kid. But Tub was one of those guys. It was a very unique individual. He loved the Lord, and he served well, you know, country and God. It was a incredible man to be around.
Neat. Tub Effinger.
Effinger.
Yep. I need to know a guy named that. Good stories. I can almost smell those hamburgers you're talking about.
Yeah, I kind of want one now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I spent some time in church when I was a little kid. You know, my dad wasn't really serving the Lord at the time, so we were sporadic in and out of church. And so I don't remember a whole lot before I was maybe 8 years old. And even then, I don't remember a whole lot of time in church. One of my first real memories, memorable food experiences at a church was actually when I was a student pastor. And I hadn't been a student pastor for very long, full-time anyways, at this church, when we had a crawfish boil. And it was my first experience with a crawfish boil. I was very skeptical that there were going to be that many people that actually liked it. Mm-hmm. And we had the crawfish boil, and it ended up being very good. But I'm very adventurous. I mean, I ate a tarantula, chocolate-covered tarantula. That's a thing I've done before. Mm-hmm. But I did not and have not been able to talk myself into what some of them were trying to get me to do, and that was to suck the brains out of the crawfish.
I was going to ask if you did the middle of it or not.
No, just couldn't bring myself to do that.
But the tails are great.
Tails are great.
Yep. But you
and
just
the
couldn't.
Sausage that they put in there and then the corn was great, but just couldn't bring myself to do that one.
I'm not fond of that either. I mean,
have you guys had it?
Oh,
Is it weird?
Yeah.
Oh no, I've not sucked the brains out.
I have, but I don't want to anymore.
Crawfish boils a lot of times.
Yeah. As long as there's a lot of those tails, I'm going with the tails.
Yeah. So I was actually surprised because teenagers are typically very picky about what they eat, and I was thinking that the crawfish boil was going to go over like a lead balloon.
No, don't cry.
But it went over really well.
Was this in Memphis?
It was.
Yeah. See, it's huge over there on the river.
It is.
That's the first place I ever ate. Was in Memphis.
Yeah. So that was that. Man, you know, interesting people over the years. The first person I can really think of that made an impact in my life was this guy. His name was Forrest McGregor.
How come you guys know people with cool names?
I don't know.
My mom
I probably did too.
Knew some people. There were twin sisters. She actually knew two sets of sisters that were interesting. One of them was Ima and Yura Hogg.
I've heard this story.
And then the other ones that she
knew. The other
were
interesting.
But you didn't go to church with these people. This is supposed to be about people you met in church.
He said interesting names. It made me think. Anyway, Forrest McGregor.
I'm pre-editing in my mind already.
Maybe I need to turn that way. You on, Jason?
Forrest was just a good dude. He was the pastor of a small church in Texas. Went to it for many years. Just a good guy. And, I mean, our church ran about 30 people at the time. And we would often have like 10 kids there.
Wow.
I mean, just percentage-wise, a huge number.
Yeah.
And it's because he chose to invest in us. And, I mean, he would have us over at his house, and we'd hang out, have youth. He'd feed us, do stuff like that. I mean, he was just a good guy. He is actually the reason that God first put it on my radar that I was called to ministry. One night after we went to church camp, he was dropping all the other students off, and I was the last one to get dropped off. And he actually asked me, he's like, "Hey, Jason, you're probably wondering why I dropped you off last. And I was like, nah, I just figured just because we live sort of close to each other and I'm furthest out. He's like, well, no, I actually wanted to ask you if you ever felt called to ministry. And that was the summer before my junior year, I believe, of high school. So he was actually the one that put it on my radar early that that might be something for me. And obviously I'm hard-headed, so it took another 4 to 5 years before I actually admitted, okay, this is what you want me to do, God. But that guy, just a good dude.
Forrest, what was his last name?
McGregor.
McGregor. That's awesome.
Tub Effinger, Forrest
Forrest
McGregor.
McGregor.
After hearing about Tub Effinger and Forrest McGregor, I can't wait now to hear from H.D. Jones.
Yeah, I'm
There's anxiety
I'm going
going on.
south. I'm going south with all these
well,
because
we started south,
you know,
so
because
we come back around full circle.
I like comedy, so the people that really meant a lot to me, they were just funny people. And so I'll start off with the food. So, I was thinking about that. I was like, I don't really remember a whole lot about the food. I guess as kids, you're just playing, you're just out playing and you didn't think a whole lot about food. But I do remember good banana pudding. For some reason, church gatherings and
Some
banana
of those
pudding.
ladies
Oh
can
my
make
gosh.
With the Nilla wafers on top.
Yeah,
You gotta have the
the
Nilla
whole
wafers.
little glass bowl and it's just lined all around, and you dig way down to get all the Nilla wafers.
Oh, now where I'm from, they'll use real, even dark bananas that are good and ripe,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it makes a banana pudding. I
Yeah,
mean, you want
that's
to
good stuff.
slap somebody when
That's
you
good stuff. But then you're talking about people, and I was like, you got to remember. I mean, I grew up in a little Baptist church, and 70s. So there was a lot of fashion shows going on during the 70s and everything. And
Right.
I remember one time, at VBS, and VBS was during the day, and you didn't go with your parents. I mean, it was just like, parents dropped. It was kind of like daycare. So they dropped you off, and we had these adults that were over our classes and stuff. But I think this particular year, there was a threat of tornado, and so they, had us all in the sanctuary, and they were talking about what we would have to do if we had a tornado or whatever. Well, we had this lady that went to church with us, and she had really big hair, like teased out 70s hair, and so they give us this big spiel about what we're to do, and then at the end of it, whoever's giving the speech says, "Now, do y'all know what to do?" And this guy beside me goes, "Yeah, I'm getting behind that woman's hair. We'll be all right." But that was just one episode. But there was this guy that he was a deacon in our church, and he's kind of a smaller guy, but he's one of those guys. You ever met these guys that they're funny, but they don't mean to be funny?
Oh, yes.
I mean, they just don't mean to be funny. They're trying to be serious, and so
Churches are littered.
Oh, my
with
gosh.
those people.
in the back of our
Did you get that?
bulletin,
Littered with them.
in the back of our bulletin, there was always a missionary moment. And so there would be a picture of some, poor little missionary that's out in Africa and his list of all his prayer needs and everything and how you could pray for them. And so Brother Ronnie would get up. He has a cool name, but
Wait a minute. Yeah, wait a minute.
it's just,
Tub Effinger,
yeah,
Forrest McGregor,
and Ronnie.
Ronnie.
Brother Ronnie.
Brother Ronnie.
Brother Ronnie. Brother Ronnie.
It's perfect.
Yeah. So Brother Ronnie would get up. He's this little guy, and he grabs a hold to the platform, pulpit, and he's up there, and he's making the announcements because the deacons did that. They made the announcements, and then he was going to share the missionary moment. Well, he'd get to reading that thing, and he'd mispronounce like 75% of the words, and people in the congregation would start laughing, and he would just kind of get miffed, but he would just. And then one time I remember him looking at it, and he goes, "Well, just pray for them little naked pygmies over there." We all lost it. I mean, we just all lost it. And he didn't even know why it was funny. I mean, he just didn't know why it was funny. So, yeah, those kind of folks, but you look back, as an adult, my wife has one of these stories where just honestly, in our world today, we'd say it's just a weird dude. Just stand off to himself. And he was the guy that met every kid when they came into church and wanted to shake their hand and give them a piece of, the old double mint gum.
I have heard y'all talk about that fella.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was really cool.
Yep.
He and back in the day you had the little silver covering over the gum, but then you had the wrapper. He kept every one of those wrappers in a drawer, and when he died, they made a wreath over his casket out of those
man.
wrappers. And so it's just back one of those things, and we can have fun and have some of those fond memories. And golly, church is full of just strange people because we're all strange in
We're
some
all
way.
strange.
But it's just a good reminder that, just just be there and love on people and do whatever it is you do.
I would like to know if any of my folks back in Northwest Arkansas can send it to comments@mikethebaptist.com. I'd like to know what Louise Hollaball was really like, because that's the only thing I remember about her. But she was always there, so there must be a good story behind Louise and her playing that piano. And I would really like for somebody to send that in. I'd like to hear that.
There were other people that were inspirational in my life, but that was just. Oh, I got to tell you one more. This is pretty cool. So the pastor that baptized me, so it would have been, probably when I was grade school. He had a special needs son, and David was just hilarious. He was one of those guys. He had braces on his legs, and he'd walk in with these canes on his arm, but he always had a smile on his face. So he's probably an adult. He was probably 25 to 30 years old, and he would just talk to everybody. Well, my dad always has had cows, raised cows, and my mom, if she listens to this, forgive me, but my mom was just always one of these ladies that's been in love with food. Mm-hmm. And Mom struggled with that her whole life. And so she has, in her own words, she's been every size of the dresses that they make. Sometimes she's the small size, sometimes. So she would go up and down this scale. Well, David noticed that about my mom. And he comes just hobbling up to my dad one night, and he's just smiling. He looks up and he says, Mr. Ted, if you can get your cows to fatten up like your wife, you'd be a rich man. Oh, my gosh. And I'm going to tell you, my mom loved it. I think David was the only guy that could ever say that about my mom. And she even says to this day, she's like, closest thing to an angel I think I've ever met. Oh. Yeah, but it was so funny. Mr. Ted, if you could get your cows to fatten up like your wife.
You know what's funny is when you, and I've thought about this a bit when I thought that'd be a good thing to talk about. When you get to thinking about that, things start popping up in your head that you hadn't thought of in years about all that. Yep. It's very interesting. All those people had a story. Do kids still glue macaroni to paper plates?
They should.
We used to do that in VBS,
yeah.
Bible schools.
Yeah,
I can really, and popsicle sticks.
I used to eat the macaroni.
The hard macaroni?
Yeah.
I didn't like
the
it.
Glue on it.
Crunchy. With the glue on it?
After he sniffed it.
Okay, this went off the rails real quick, so we'll take a break, come back, talk about some stuff we found in the Bible this week.
Sweet.
Stick with us.
Do you listen to or watch Mike the Baptist? Do you wear clothes? If so, we've got some great news. T-shirts and hoodies are now available at MikeTheBaptist.com. Just visit MikeTheBaptist.com, click on the merchandise link, and you'll find high-quality tees, hoodies, and even onesies for the babies in a variety of colors, all with the Mike the Baptist logo and familiar sayings from the program. Mike the Baptist is a true labor of love. No one has to pay to listen or watch the program, but Mike and the crew have to eat. So a portion of each sale of a t-shirt or hoodie goes to Mike's local Kroger, Walmart, or electric utility. It's kind of simple like that. In order to keep the program free, we have to generate a bit of income to pay the bills. When you make a purchase, you're not only doing the world a favor by wearing clothes, you're helping keep the messages of Mike the Baptist on the air. Thanks for helping out, and thanks so much for being involved in spreading the good news. What a great planet.
Hey, we're back, and we're going to turn this segment of the program over to the real preachers here, and they're going to talk about some things we found in the Bible this week.
Well, I don't know if you guys ever struggle with this. Maybe this is just something unique to me, but I would imagine that you guys struggle with it as well. You guys ever wonder about the impact that you're able to make? Sometimes it feels like you're not making any impact at all. Well, there were a couple guys in the Bible, Elijah and Elisha, and they were what they call prophets, which basically just meant they were people that told Israel, hey, if you don't stop being dumb, this is what's going to happen. And so that was essentially their job, and they were prophets for Israel for about 100 years. But before and after, most of the kings were evil. either the kings or the judges, were pretty evil. And so sometimes it's easy to dismiss the impact that just one person can make. For 100 years, Israel had strong people telling them about God. Now, it didn't mean that everybody followed that advice, but for 100 years, there were, generally speaking, more righteous kings. Generally speaking, Israel was doing the right thing. Not always, but generally speaking, that was the case. And then afterwards, most of them were evil. With that in mind, I mean, where can God use us to make an impact?
You know, it's interesting to think about the impact that you have on others. 20 years ago, you know, there's a kid in our youth group, and I never really paid attention or never thought about how much kids ponder what we say, you know, as teachers or preachers. And this boy would come back to me months after a certain lesson would be taught, and he would be reciting to me things I'd said, you know, in a lesson, and about how much of an impact that had on him, how it would challenge him and stuff like that. Hadn't been here at Temple very long. And I think it was, again, over one of our coffee talks. Nick came back, you know, weeks later, and
Nick's a good dude.
He is, and he was referring to something that I said in a previous conversation, and it's like I don't even remember saying it, but I'm like, man, people are really listening. And just because I'm a terrible listener, I don't remember things.
What were we saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and it is incredible how much people are taking in what we say. And not just us because we're preachers, but people really do listen a lot of the times to us.
Yeah. The impact that we have is not always seen, and that's the biggest thing that, you know, we don't understand. I've had kids that weren't even members of our church, but came to our VBS or something, and then you see them as an adult somewhere, and they're like, hey, just wanted you to know that I've given my life to do, you know, missions, and you were the one that inspired me. And I'm like, I don't even know your name, you know. And, you know, it's hard for us to see. And that's one of the things that, you know, I hope we can encourage our listeners is that, you know, doing the right things and being obedient to God and doing all that stuff, you may not see the initial result of that. I mean, so many things. You think these two prophets that Jason has mentioned, Elijah, one of the things that's cool about him is that toward the end of his ministry, he's complaining to God that I'm the only person left that's still following you, you know, but his whole ministry was just ups and downs. And one minute, well, matter of fact, the beginning of the story, all we see is Elijah's walking into this wicked king Ahab to tell him, it's not going to rain again until I tell you. I mean, can you imagine the audacity and the power to do that? Because that's what God had told him. And he says, it's not going to rain again until I say it's going to rain. And from that moment, he then runs to the wilderness. Then he runs further away for 3 years to preach to a widow woman and her son for 3 years. God's number one man, and his whole audience, even though he had been in the courts with the kings, his whole audience for 3 years. And, you know, put that in perspective for us. You know, sometimes we think, we'll only get to speak to 30 or 40 kids every Wednesday night. And why isn't my program this? And why isn't our church doing this? And look at this church down here, how many people they've got. And we measure things in quantity. God's got a different way of looking at it. And I would just say, you know, yeah, we struggle with significance in our ministry. All of us do. And so, you know, I know people in our churches struggle with, I've been teaching Sunday school for 3 years and nobody seems to care, or I haven't led anybody to the Lord. I guess I'm not the right person. You just don't know.
That's right.
You know, just like these people we're bringing up, you know, even this woman who played terrible music, you know, had an impact on Michael. She was just being obedient using what she had. And I think that's our call, is just to do what we can.
I've had this phrase running through my head for several weeks. God's economy.
Yep.
Oh, hit the buzzer.
Okay.
Hit the buzzer.
Really?
Oh, come
You know what? I
on.
didn't even think about that. I'll do it again. I didn't even realize. I didn't realize what I'd done. But now I'll talk about it. You know, I go through transitions. I'm a creative guy, and creative people they challenge themselves to do something, and when they do that, they kind of sometimes look for something else to do. That's what we do. We create. So if you just create the same thing over and over and over, you get a little tired. Mm. Not the podcast. I'm not saying anything about the podcast with you guys, but because this is really I'm really liking this, and I think this is only starting where this is supposed to go. I feel, I'm not going to say led, but I'm feeling like
giddy.
Has God spoken to you?
Oh, now I'm not buzzing God there. No,
his ability to speak.
So I go through these periods where I'm trying to figure out directions, for myself and how to make things fit. And we work in a society and in life where you have to marry finances with what you're doing and on all that. It's all got to work together, because if you just do one, the other doesn't work. You just do the other doesn't. So I got to really thinking about all this deeply here in the last few weeks. But the phrase, I don't know where it came from in my head, but it just like, it keeps reminding me that his economy, the way things work, not just financially, but your time, your money, your efforts, your purpose, your goals. It's like he just keeps reminding me of this phrase. God's economy is different than the way I would lay all this out in my head. And it's kept me down in a way. I wrote a song once and it had a line in it, love is a rock. Is it holding me down or just in place? And this is the same concept that I'm thinking that he's telling me, let him work out the details of where things are going, and you just kind of stay in place, because his economy is different than others. And the reason I bring that up with what we're talking about here is these people that we talked about right off the bat that are in our heads. That's part of God's economy. He's planted those things in me and in you, those people along the trail in our stories that we're all individually writing here. It's like he's planted these little investments in your psyche all through the years. It's part of his economy. What's happening to me is I'm realizing what's valuable. The older I get, and as all these things are coming together, I can see how he has brought me to a place in my life totally different than where I thought years ago I was going to be and how I was going to be here. But it's a place that's more right all the time. And it's his economy. It wasn't mine. It wasn't how I had planned things or would plan things. But the more I let him kind of direct that, the more it works out correctly. So I bring that up because all we're talking about, all these things that have happened over time in my life, all add up now to kind of make sense to things I'm doing and the things that he's kind of, I feel like, directed me to do. In the past, using my own sensibilities and my own methods, my own economy, I made a train wreck out of a lot of things. But the more I kind of stand back and let him do his, so his economy has nothing to do with money. It has to do with purpose and direction, contentment, which we've been talking about for several weeks, satisfaction. What was your original thing you were talking about? It just triggered something in me.
Well, you think about these prophets, and as a matter of fact, when you're a pastor, other pastors come and talk to you, and I'll be the first to say, it's been a lot of fun to be a pastor at Temple Baptist Church because we're in a growing city. We've been able to grow the church and do some things, and I know it's not us, but people on the outside, they want to come in and kind of kick the tires and go, how did you make this happen? And how did you make that happen? And all that. And I spoke to one guy one day over lunch, and he was really kind of broken, kind of at the end of his ministry. And he said, I wish I could have had half the success that you've seen over at Temple. I guess God's just always, didn't want me to be successful. And I just stopped him and I said, think about Elijah. think about Jeremiah, the prophet,
The
who
weeping prophet.
who goes out and gives a message that nobody wanted to hear, trying to keep them out of going into captivity, but they went into captivity anyway, and I'm sure he felt like a complete failure. But how many people in the church over the last 2,500, 3,000 years have felt encouraged by Elijah's story, Jeremiah's story? So our stories are even bigger than we are, and what we build as success, God's like, it's not just about the 60 or 70 or 80 years that you have here on the earth. I'm doing something more with your faithfulness than you can even begin to understand. We're right now in that process of asking people to fill a shoebox for Samaritan's Purse. And I really believe this. I mean, there are some of our people at church who never would feel comfortable going knocking on a door, sharing their testimony, but they'll go get a box and they'll fill it full of a lot of stuff. And I really believe they're thinking about a kid and they're praying, God, do something with this box, and they'll turn it in, and there will be no fanfare, there will be no pat them on the back. But I think one day in heaven, somebody's going to come up and pull at their coattail and say, hey, I want to thank you for picking out those toys, because through that, God got a message to me, and da-da-da. So those are the things that we don't know, and we just have to believe that, He's working that out. And that comes to that contentment thing.
You're talking about this church that we're all involved in, how it's doing all this growing, and people asking you over time, how did you do that? How did you do that? You know what I've observed? I've been there 25 or 26 years. You know what I've observed, and I've just now am thinking about it. We all didn't do something. We let it happen. We let it happen.
Yeah.
Literally, because I know a lot of those meetings over the years about decisions and how things were progressing. And I can't recall any of those people just getting real forceful about an idea or something, but I recall over and over about the feeling that he's doing this, and we need to let certain things happen, even if we don't understand them. So, just an observation. But
So, two things. I find it really awesome that you use the word economy.
Okay.
So the word
You made
economy.
him buzz himself.
No, I know. That's funny. Just the way he said God's economy.
well,
okay.
he's correct. If I'm going to have the buzzer,
that did
I have
sound
to.
that sounded churchy.
He did. But
I'm eventually going to get us all buzzers. That'll be
the word
entertaining.
economy in the original meaning of the word basically is sort of like house law, the way a house is run. It's from it's a combination word, house rules, essentially house law.
You're kidding.
No, that is economy, the way a house is run. And so when you say God's economy, the way God runs his house is really, in essence, what you're saying. It's not dealing with finances, although that's a part of it, but the way God runs his house is just different.
And by the way, the phrase "God's house" is in the Bible.
It's in the Bible.
yeah.
Yes.
I've learned that
That's right.
over the
It's
last
any-
few weeks.
Yeah. And going back to what you said about the shoeboxes, there is an individual who does not want to be named, who for the last multiple years has given money to the students to fill shoeboxes. And it's not a small amount, it's a big amount. And so our church has the opportunity to go out and serve Thanksgiving meals. And after that, what we do is we'll go and fill shoeboxes with the money that this guy gets. And the kids get so excited about filling, I don't know, half a dozen shoeboxes. I don't even remember how many we get to do. It's a lot. And getting to fill those and see these kids get excited about doing ministry, about serving other people because somebody doesn't want to be named. In God's house rules, this is how it works, man. You have some people that just equip others to do stuff. He makes an impact that so many people have no idea that he makes an impact.
The conversation started out about what you say, and Koontz was talking about not being aware that, how closely people are listening, but people may not be observing you real close either, but if you think in your own mind, you look back through your life at things people did along the way that kind of impacted you or impressed you, or in this church spiritual stuff that we talk about, I think about a guy that talked to me about giving my life to Christ over the bed of a pickup truck at a gas station one time. I don't know if he may or not listen to these, but I don't know if he remembers talking to me, but I think I was a late teenager, 17, 18 years old maybe. And at that time, I probably dodged him a little bit. He was one of those guys who was deep in church, and I knew it. And you knew if you got close to him, he's going to bring it up. But I can recall being across the bed of a truck with him, probably 2-minute conversation, but that's always been in my mind. Mm-hmm. It's always been in my mind, and in fact, I think I was truly saved in 96 or 97, out roaming around the country by myself. That's one of the first things I thought about, is that conversation he had with me, which if I remember it right, basically put me on notice. Mm-hmm. That you need to think about this right here because it matters. Which, there's been a few people in my life. A psychology teacher drugged me out in the hall one day and told me, "Jackson, you're a smart," and she used the word. And nobody had really stood in my face. Smart aleck, something like that. Yeah, she drugged me right out of class, closed the door in the hall, and looked at me and said, "Jackson, you're a smart aleck." But you know what that did? Up until then, nobody had really, no authority figure like that had ever just got me right and looked me right in the face and told me that. Man, I had this great respect for her after that, and still do to this day. I mean, she, and just like this guy across the bed of that truck, he just told me in no uncertain terms. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember the feeling that I got and knowing he was right, and I was dodging it. But so yes, I mean, so what's the two words that make up economy? The running of the house, so to speak?
Yeah, basically. There's the Greek word for house, which is oikos, and nomia is the Greek word for law. So
you think it's safe to say that God is tailoring the things that happen to you along the way in your life so that you get to this reward down the road here? I mean, the payoff in the economy, so to speak, the value. You think he's doing that?
As a parent and now a grandparent, you can think of all the things that you do to guide your child. Manipulate is maybe a bad word, but manipulate. You have
to do a little bit.
You're doing things to push them in directions and to keep them out. And even the little things that they do, you celebrate. And, just the grandkids. So, cooking breakfast. Elliot, 4 or 5 years old. "Papa, I want to cook breakfast." "Okay, let's go in there." Well, here's the reality. I bought all the food, paid for all the electrical bill. I'm the one in charge. Basically, I'm holding her up to drop the toast in the toaster. I'm pushing the button. I'm setting the dial. She has very minimal skin in the game. Mm-hmm. But she feels good about herself. I feel good about us doing that together. And we got to feed some people, and we had a good time doing that. And how much more is God? He doesn't need me, to preach a sermon. He could use a donkey. That's in the Bible. That's an innie. He speaks through a donkey. He doesn't need us. But how cool is it that he wants us, and how frustrating he has to be, or he has to get at us when we look at him and go, "Well, I'm not doing anything big for you, so I'm just not going to do anything." We miss, again, that God's taking the little things. Billy Graham. We all know what Dr. Graham's ministry has turned out to be and how awesome it was. But, there was that Sunday school teacher that shared Christ with him. I think about our church. You think about our church and two of the guys that helped start the church. Do you remember where Garnet and Charlie came from? What church?
Yes.
Laughlin Baptist? Wasn't that the name
down
of it?
on Dickerson Road or Lakewood?
I thought it was Laughlin or something like that. Anyway, we got to talking about that, and so these two men were friends, or at least knew each other, elementary school, and they went to this church. Just so happens the guy that was my pastor that baptized me went to that same church. Frank Evans became the director of missions at the Robertson County Baptist Association when Charlie and Garnet decided God had led them to start a church. And who they go talk to? They go talk to Frank Evans. And all that stuff that God has been doing through Temple Baptist Church. And I started to think about, who are those Sunday school teachers and RA teachers that poured into those men that allowed them to be able to, it's just crazy, and it's really cool to see how God does those things.
Coincidence.
Quinky dink.
That's just coincidence.
Yep.
We've been looking at this from the positive side of the impact one person can make. Let's take a switch here and look at it from the opposite side. Sometimes, I don't know if you guys are like this, but sometimes it's frustrating to see society today and to see sinful people have good, long, prosperous lives, and to see that happen a lot. Now, when it comes to the rulers of Israel and Judah, as a general rule, those that were righteous had longer rules, longer reigns as king, and some of the ones that were unrighteous had, generally speaking, shorter time periods where they were king. But sometimes it feels like what we see is people that have sold their souls for something other than God, and they're the ones that we see that are successful. Too often, it feels like. And so do you guys ever get, what are you guys' thoughts about that? Do you ever find that frustrating to see people that just are successful in so many different ways, that have sold themselves to the ideas of this world, that are running hard and fast away from God? Do you guys ever struggle with that?
Well, yeah.
It's frustrating because you see oftentimes the ones that are the most successful, the most influential, the ones that are the most powerful, they're just, generally speaking, not following God. The ones that we do love and respect the most often are the ones that we catch a glimpse of their inside life. I didn't know this until just recently, but everybody apparently, pretty well loved the Queen of England. Apparently, when she died, one of the things that came out is she was a devoted Christian. Mm-hmm. Loved Jesus, had her own quiet time all the time. We loved her, but she seems to be an outlier. And so do you guys ever wonder, do you ever just groan internally and just wonder, why does evil seem to succeed so well on this side of eternity?
It ain't always internal. I know
Yeah.
people regularly complain about, well, that guy's crooked as he could be. Why is he doing so good?
It used to bother me an awful lot. I would get aggravated with what you're talking about. I'd get aggravated. One of the things that HD mentioned earlier about comparing ourselves with pastors or other churches that might just be mega churches or doing things that we just can't do and things like that. But God has kind of been, I think he's been revealing to us, we're looking at the wrong things as well. Just in this past summer with a lot of bad things that have come out about some preachers and things like that.
That's right.
Why am I putting all my focus on these other fellas?
Mm-hmm.
I can learn a lot from man, but where's my focus need to be at? And I just don't pay a whole lot of attention to a lot of it anymore. And especially celebrities and things like that. It doesn't bother me anymore. I know what they are, know what they have and stuff, but I'm like, I've got so much better waiting for me one day, and we're just going through this temporary thing right now.
Yeah. And part of that is when we get frustrated, when we get anxious about when our leaders are not good leaders, this, that, and the other, or the economy is not going the way that we want it to, inherent in that is oftentimes a lack of trust in God. Inherent in that is a lack of trust that God will, as Scripture says, in his heart a man may plan his steps, but God determines his path. In Scripture, it says that God moves the heart of the king. The heart is like waters, and God moves them where He wants. And so, inherently in our anxiety about that, inherently in our frustrations with things not going the way that we think that they should, with unrighteous people succeeding, is inherently a lack of trust in God. And that is hard to recognize in ourselves. It's easy to get frustrated when we see that, but underlying that, our frustration is often a lack of trust that God will, in the end, make things right. Mm-hmm. And even if God doesn't fix every evil now, oftentimes He does. Like with the kings of Israel, they generally had a shorter reign if they were evil, and generally had a longer reign if they were righteous, but not always. But even if God doesn't fix every evil now, do we really trust Him to do that eventually, in eternity? And that's a question we have to ask ourselves, because sometimes we can look at other people's bad behavior and see them get away with it, and then we begin to think in ourselves, well, it's working for them. Yeah. Maybe I can get away with it. And we can confuse God's mercy with God's okay in our behavior. We can confuse God's grace, mistaking His delayed punishment for our sin, with God's blessing. And, in the end, this side of eternity doesn't matter a whole lot. It does. I mean, what we do on this side of eternity determines what happens to us on the other side of eternity. But what we do over here is a very short time period. And it's done quick. And all those years that we struggle and, just put our back to the plow and really press hard against breaking ground and making sure that our bank account is healthy enough to carry us through our lean years, to make sure that our kids are doing the right thing, to make sure that we're succeeding in our jobs and we're the most successful that we can possibly be. All that struggle on this side of eternity doesn't really mean a whole lot on the other side of eternity. Because one day, even all the good things that we do, and we get all these crowns in heaven for all of our righteous deeds, it says that we're actually going to lay those down at the foot of Christ.
We get hung up on what's really a lot of little things.
Yeah.
That's what this life is. A lot of this life is little things. There's one big thing. What is somebody doing with Jesus? Mm-hmm. And that's the one big thing that we need to get hung up on even more so, because, like you said, all this other stuff, man, it doesn't amount to much. Now, the guys that we've talked about today that were impactful in our lives and stuff, because a lot of them were Christian guys that we've talked about and stuff like that, that's all a part of our story. That was meaningful stuff. But, what are we going to do with Jesus? What is somebody else going to do with Jesus? That's what's going to carry over into the eternity you keep talking about.
The thought that we have to realize, too, is that we're going to have the up and downs.
Yeah.
There are going to be times. We talked about contentment several sessions. We've talked about, Paul saying, I've learned to be content with little. I've learned to be content with much. But the reality of the question that we have to ask ourselves, is God enough? Is God enough? And that, it's hard for us to think that sometimes. I mean, if you ask that question, you're like, oh, absolutely. But what if you got a phone call that said, all of your family has been decimated, a bomb's been dropped? Is God enough? If the blessings were taken away, is God enough? And one of the cool things, when you look at Elijah's story and you kind of back up a little bit, he had multiple wilderness experiences, or what we'd call difficulties. And one of them was right after he had walked in to say, it's not going to rain for 3 years. God said, look, you need to go down to the creek and hide out. God sent him to the wilderness. God was with him. God fed him. But then we see, after Mount Carmel, Jezebel complains about Elijah and says, I'm going to have him killed. Then he puts himself in the desert. And there he was more miserable because he wasn't walking with God in those moments. And I think that comes back to, what is our response to life? And it's got to be, I'm walking with him. I'm trying to be obedient with him. I'm trying to do what I'm supposed to do today. I like Henry Blackaby's thing in Experiencing God. He said, just keep doing what you did yesterday, tomorrow, until God tells you to do something else. And there's some lot of wisdom in that. And not every day is going to be, hey, I got to speak to 10,000 people and so many accepted Christ. Tomorrow may be, I got to write a few notes and make a few phone calls and have a lunch meeting with somebody. But again, if we're just being obedient in that.
So let's put some application to these concepts that we're looking at. What are some of the more, in your experience, what are some of the sins that people do consistently and frequently because they feel like they get away with it?
Is application a churchy word? It's not.
Because you got applications on your phone. Those down things you download.
All right.
And you apply medicine
We call
to
them
wounds.
apps. We call them apps, but they're applications.
I was going to buzz that, but I thought application.
Yeah.
But nope, you got to pass on that.
Let's make it real.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, rephrase it.
All right.
Let's make it real. What are some of the things that people do that are just jacked up
Well,
Now we're talking.
because they think they get away with it?
and think about what we're carrying around with us. We got access to the internet. How many guys are looking at things on their phones right now
Bang.
that we're not supposed to be looking at? I mean, we would probably be sick if we knew how many people in the church were guilty of that on a weekly basis.
That's a problem.
It is a problem.
It's,
How about
it's a
daily
human
basis?
problem. It's not a church problem. It's a human problem.
Sure. Yeah.
But
But it's a church
his
problem
old-
because the four of us are a part of the church.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that make up a part of that church that we're doing things we ain't supposed to be doing.
That's a big one for guys. What are some other ones? I mean, that's a huge one. That's just, and that's not even just for adults anymore.
No.
They say that kids are exposed to that
Oh,
kind of
it's
stuff in
awful.
elementary school,
yeah, it's awful.
late elementary school. I mean, it's just insane. If you're actually, as a student minister, if you're not talking to students about God's way of having right relationships with other people, specifically in that area, if you're not talking to them about that very early, you're too late.
I wonder what it'd be like if we put you had to have a permit to have a cell phone. Like we don't let kids drive cars until they're 15, 16 years old. I wonder what would change if we did that with cell phones.
So it's interesting that you say that. Fundamentally, a student's brain is different than yours and mine. Their brains have been fundamentally rewired. Literally, their brains light up differently because technology is such a big aspect of their life in a way that your brain, my brain, did not form.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their brains literally light up differently on an EKG.
Well, Avery wouldn't be able to text his grandma and,
Pull those things
yeah,
on.
I mean,
No,
it'd be terrible.
that part, yeah.
So we made it real in one way. What's another way that you guys have
What was the
seen?
question?
What are
struggle
some of
with?
the things people get away with or do because they think they get away with it? Pornography is one.
Are you talking about
that's huge.
Christian people or just
Greed.
people?
Greed.
Greed.
Greed's a big, I think just using other people. I mean, that's what pornography is. You're using other people, but we do that in lots of ways.
That's true.
Just,
Business.
just using and abusing people,
Yeah.
as if the only thing that matters is you. Self-preservation over anybody else. Well, those are some
My
big
dad
things.
was a service manager at a dealership for many years with Ford, and the things that would often make him the most frustrated with his employees is when they would, because they thought they were getting away with it, take advantage of the customer to a dangerous extent. Especially so when my dad at one point in time found an employee that was saying they were replacing brake parts and not, because he was selling those brake parts somewhere else. And he was actually putting somebody's life at risk. And my dad actually, in his less Christian days, chased him around the shop with a wrench because he was putting somebody else's life in.
Are y'all amazed when you see these stories on the news or something? Like, I remember, they're like, hey, be careful when you pull up to the gas pump and you put your card in there because there are thieves who have created a plastic piece and the hardware to look like that, but it's actually going to their cell phone and giving all your information. I'm like, if these guys are that smart, why can't they go get a real job and use their brain that they obviously have and their creativity that they obviously have something for good? But it just I don't know, it just frustrates
It's the
me.
same reason years ago they would put a string and a piece of tape on a quarter to steal a Coke out of a Coke machine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's no different.
Yeah.
It's the same thing on the inside of humans. I got news for y'all and everybody else. There's always been, there's always going to be crooked people on the planet, and you're gonna envy things they do in a sick sort of way that, and you don't even want to feel that way, but it's what you keep saying. You feel like they're getting away with something, and although you wouldn't go do the wrong thing, it still feels that same way when you see somebody else prosper off of doing wrong. It's an envy. It's a human thing. It's a jealousy and envy, but not for what they're doing, but for the fact that they're gaining, and they're gaining wrong.
So the one that I would point out is it's a phenomenon that has really popped up with the age groups that I work with. It's cheating, and I don't mean just in a test, just in doing that stuff, because that mentality and philosophy of life that happens when they do that bleeds over into other sections of their life. But they do not see cheating as a bad thing.
No.
They will literally, teachers will have to print multiple tests, not just for a particular class period, but from one class period to the next, because students will take the tests, text their friends the answers, or they've gotten sophisticated. I had a college professor tell me one time he caught a student that had a watch that they had hollowed out the watch, and you could pull out the side piece and there was a scroll. He would pull out the scroll, had notes, and then he would put it back up, push it back in.
Wow.
Just to cheat. And you're selling yourself short on to become the person of character that when you are successful, you're selling yourself short when you do those things, because when you are successful, you will not handle that success well, whether financially, relationally, whatever. You will not handle that success well if you cheat to get ahead, because when you get it, the things that you did to get it, you will continue to do while you'll have it, but your impact will be on a far greater number of people, and you'll just be a messed up person. You won't be happy and satisfied with what you have because you cheated to get there, and it'll never be enough. It wrecks who you are at the core of your soul.
Well, we see that in our society as a whole. You know, again, back to who are we kind of envious of, and why do bad people succeed and all that stuff. But I'm going to tell you, some of these things don't have a real just cut and dry answer. It sounds real cut and dry. You know, it's like, hey, you see that guy on the corner? He's out there, got to feed me, I'm hungry. And you're going, right behind you, that group right there is paying $15 an hour. Why don't you take your lazy tail and go in there? It's not as easy as sometimes we want to make it. So our world is messed up. And I think that's why the church, even early on, said, Maranatha, come quickly, Lord Jesus, because we realize it's in such a mess that the only answer is Jesus, and like when he can come back and fix all this stuff. But I remember years ago we did I was doing an audit of the school board. And so, you know, when I was a kid, I didn't know anything about free lunch program. Didn't have a clue what that was. I remember one girl that was in my class in elementary school that had a ticket. And when we go through the lunch line, you know, we still had cash. You'd pay for your lunch, and this one girl had a ticket and didn't really understand that, but then later found out, you know, she was on free lunch program. Well, as an adult, I go and audit the Metro Education Department. And I pull this list, because when you audit, you pull list and you take samples of the list. And I pull this list, and everybody that was on the list that I took a sample of, somebody had called in to basically say to the school board, that kid right there doesn't deserve the free lunch program. They don't meet the qualifications for the free lunch program. Their mom and daddy have enough money, and it could have been a family member or anybody could turn them in. And so I went and talked to the supervisor about it, and I was really disturbed. I'm like, you have a 99% fail rate. This list of names, 99%. When I've pulled it and I've done the audit, they don't qualify for the free lunch program. What are you going to do about it? I remember she pushed away from the desk. She folded her arms. She said, "You going to tell that kid they can't eat today?" She said, "I'm not. Because we know that people are cheating the system. We know they're taking advantage. But we also know some that don't meet the qualifications financially. Mama's spending the money on crack, and the kids aren't getting anything to eat at home. So you're going to tell them they can't eat today?" And I was like, "I'll be right back." I had to go back to my office, but these things are so huge. It's so, golly, how are we going to fix our society? Well, take cell phones out. That's not going to fix society.
Nope.
Get all the homeless people. That's a big thing in Nashville right now. We're going to spend $50 million to make the homeless people more comfortable. Well, you know what you're doing? You're putting them in a home, and they're not going to like that either because they have a problem and they're going to go live in the woods anyway. It's just chaotic. And so what's the answer to all this stuff?
It's a heart condition,
Right?
across the board.
So what
For all of
would
it.
we do, considering it's a heart condition, what would we do if instead of seeing delayed punishment for our bad behavior, what if we saw it as God's grace instead of God's blessing?
On our,
We do bad things.
when we're looking at ourselves.
Yeah. Well, for ourselves, what would we do in ourselves, knowing it's a heart issue? If we saw God not punishing our bad behavior as God's grace and not His blessing.
What it should do to you is cause you to want to be different yourself. It should cause you to repay, so to speak, the favor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like if you
Look at the 99 and say, okay.
And I don't know if this is true. I was told this, so you can Google this and figure this out.
this
but-
is hearsay.
Yeah, this is just hearsay. But if it's true, this will get to my point. Somebody told me that before he died, that Jeffrey Dahmer received Christ. If that's true, I don't know how many people he killed and ate. Bizarre
Super weird.
sin life. If it's true that Jeffrey Dahmer accepted Christ before he died and ends up in heaven, do we see that as fair? Do we see that as okay? Are we okay that God would do that?
I always play the mental game with Hitler on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if at the end of World War II he's in the bunker and instead of taking his own life, he had given it to Christ? How many people would struggle with God offering grace to him?
I wouldn't, because I know what he's offered grace to me for.
Yeah.
It would be very challenging.
Yeah.
In an immature faith.
Well,
that's for sure.
it's challenging mentally
and
any way
it's-
you look at it because of
even
the
as
things.
a more mature Christian, that's an obstacle to get over. But
But you have to
you have to.
you have to accept that in God's economy, so to speak.
That's right. And you just you got to be thankful for it because
Yep.
because the alternative is forever and ever and ever.
Can
a
you get to the
horrible
point?
place.
Can you get to the point in yourself where you're happy for Hitler if he did that? That's a huge question.
And not angry at God for offering grace to Hitler.
Yeah, I'm not going to get mad at God about anything. You guys do what you want, but I ain't going there on that one. I may be confused about some things, but I ain't going there on getting mad at him. I guess some people do. I hear that a lot, but
Well, it doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem
Right.
reasonable in our mind. But again, the reality is God's God, and He has a bigger plan in mind, and He's working, and we rate our sins.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I never murdered somebody and ate them. That dude right there, man, he deserves to go to hell because look at all the pain he caused all these families. And because he caused that pain, he deserves pain. And we like that part of retribution, but we don't like the part when, well, what about you when you stole that thing or you hurt that person's child, or you lied here, and you're like, oh, well, that's not that bad. In God's eyes, it's that bad.
Yeah.
And part of this, even with this guy we're talking about, is you have this feeling toward him that he's gotten away with something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which really gets confusing in your head when you think, did God forgive him at the last minute and accept him? That's the ultimate getting away with the bad stuff. So what do you do with that in your
Just
head?
like us. I mean, what all did we get away with? You know, it's like HT said, you know, my sin's just as bad, and I'm going to get to go home to glory one day.
I feel blessed.
Yeah.
So
I really
one of the things that helps me mentally with this, you guys probably be like, whatever, but the level of the insult rises with the majesty of the person involved.
Hang on a minute. I got to think. That's pretty deep. So
Yes,
The level?
the level of the insult.
you mean buzzing? I don't even know if I should.
I know
yet
it's just
because
over our head. Just buzz him, just for the heck of it.
The level of the insult
Hang on.
Okay, just anyway.
Carry on.
rises with the majesty of the one involved. Okay.
Sometimes.
Oh, okay. I
No,
see what
all
you're
the
saying.
time. Think about this. The level of the offense rises with the majesty of the one involved. If you were to punch me in the face, there's a penalty for that. Depending on the severity of it, you know, how many times you did it, there's a severity with that. If you did that with the president, it just got escalated in a big way.
Yeah, but Jeffrey Dahmer wasn't famous until he.
No. Follow me on the logic on this. So the level of the offense rises with the majesty of the one involved. The problem is we have a tendency to view sin as my sin's not as bad as that person's sin. We forget that God is all majestic, most worthy being, ever has been, ever will be. His son willingly chose to die for us. And so each and every sin that we did is not a minor sin. Each and every sin that we did, because we are doing it against the one who is perfect, the one who loved us from the beginning, who has never done anything wrong, always does what's in our best interest and his glory. When we do that offense to him, it doesn't matter how minor, and I'll put that in air quotes, that is for us, it's a felony offense. It's a capital offense. And so we mistake our sin as being better or worse than somebody else's sin. And because it's God, because he's perfect, all majestic, all holy, it doesn't matter what sin it was. It was a capital punishment offense.
Take up an offering and give an altar call right there. I have a theory when you started talking in this segment about the kings.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
you're
I was
good.
going somewhere else with it.
Well, we all do that. This is part of the process here. You know how church people are. They get church, everybody wants to talk. So you just got to cut people off sometimes. Anyway, I got a theory about when you started talking, you were talking about the kings. And it seems the righteous, good people had longer reigns.
Generally speaking, yeah.
I have a theory about why that is. Because you ain't going to get the best of God's plan. You might cause a little chaos in it, but you are not going to alter it. His plan is going to carry forward, regardless of the pesky rulers and leaders that come along and cause chaos in it. That's my theory about why you might see longer reigns on people that stay closer to his plan moving forward than those who go against it. Just theory. I think it's probably right, but
I always say I'd rather him be fighting for me than to fight against me.
yeah, because you ain't going to win.
And that's what you see in those kings' lives. God was fighting for them as they followed his plan, and he fought against those who were going against his plan. Doesn't mean that an evil king didn't have any success, and doesn't mean that a good king didn't have any failures. But generally speaking, God fights for those who are obedient and doing what he asks us to do, and he fights against those who are being disobedient.
Specifically with the kings of Babylon and the kings of Assyria, those were people that were really evil. I mean, they did lots of crazy stuff. There was a reason that Israel didn't like them. There was a reason that Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh, because they did crazy stuff. Even those evil people their reign only extended as far as God allowed them to extend, because God had something he wanted to do through them. And so repeatedly in Ezekiel, there's this phrase, then they will know that I am the Lord. Then they will know that I am the Lord. And it was usually in reference to being punished. And if you look in Ezekiel, it says repeatedly, there's, I think it's chapter 22 specifically, where it just repeatedly says, because you, because you, because you, because you. I mean, it just continuously points to our own sin. Israel had been doing this sin for a long time before God finally said, you're not getting away with it anymore. And as hard as the exile was, it was actually for Israel's good. Because if Israel had been allowed to continue the way that they were going, they were running so hard and so fast away from God that they were getting to a point of no return. God was pulling them back before they got to that point. And he wanted them to actually, in the future, in some time, after they had been punished and they realized the error of their ways, he wanted them to actually be able to experience God's love and grace and mercy again. And so even when evil people win, it might just be because God has a plan for that. And even when evil people don't get punished, it might just be because God is being merciful and gracious to us. Because he wants us to be able to eventually recognize, man, the way I'm doing it, I need God instead.
Deep stuff, but good stuff.
The Bible's full of good stuff, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah. You should give it a shot if you haven't before.
It only takes 15 minutes a day
That's what you said?
to read the Bible cover to cover. If you watch an hour of TV, will spend more time watching commercials than you will taking time to read the Bible cover
Once
to
the
cover.
Bible's on TV.
That'd just be crazy.
Well, since a lot of people are there anyway, it's just a thought. Good talk, fellas. All right. We got to go to the bathroom, so we're going to take a break. We'll be back. Any or outie coming right up.
Hey, everybody, it's time to play America's almost favoriteest new game show, Any or Outie, where we challenge our guests to figure out if a phrase we give them is actually in the Bible or out of the Bible. Sharpen your wits, guest. You're about to be in the hot seat of Bible stuff, because you're the next contestant on Any or Outie. Here's Mike.
Any or outie is so exciting, and you know what? It's actually educational, I've found out. I think we may have talked about that a time or two recently, kind of hinted at the fact that it's kind of interesting learning some things here that I didn't really know before now. You just take for granted. You know what? I think it's going to be a good thing when Any or Outie catches on nationwide, worldwide, and more people start doing this. I think it's going to be good for people. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be beneficial. Of course, you know, at some point they're going to change the title from Any or Outie to something a little more substantial and meaningful, but
I kind of like it. It's catchy.
we're going to hang on to it here at Mike the Baptist.
Trademarked.
Yeah.
I think that's an any, not an outie. The title.
We'll have to talk about that sometime, but
Visible confusion.
yeah,
That's what I saw.
yeah. Sometimes my mind kind of just stops me, like those fainting goats.
Anyway, Any or Outie today.
Yes, the people in power today. Kuntz and I were in power the last episode we had. No, actually, it's been several weeks ago. I don't know when it was, but the last time we were all together in this setting, you and I were in power.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Today, H.D. Jones and Jason Riccardi are in power, and I'm a little frightened,
You should be.
but I'm ready. I'm ready. Take it away, fellas. Let's go. Let's do this.
You want to go first?
So one of the reasons given that people will reject God is because they believe they're too holy for God.
Say again.
One of the reasons that people will give for rejecting God is they believe they're too holy for God. In other words, they feel like they're almost holier than God.
And your question is
Is that in the Bible or not?
that people say they're too holy, or people are?
They say that. That's one of their excuses for not needing God, that they're too holy for Him.
Okay, so you're talking about, like, is it in there where a character at some point in the scripture might have said, I'm
too holy for you.
Now we're getting somewhere. The music can
So is that where the phrase "holier than thou" comes from? Is that what you're?
holier than thou.
That's a phrase that we have.
We use?
And somebody put the word thou in that phrase.
That would be the King James version.
It sounds,
Can you give me the Message equivalent?
Nope, I don't think you can.
It's kind of just a phraseology, yeah.
The question is anywhere in Scripture, in the Bible, is there an example of where somebody said they were too holy to believe in God, or too holy for God?
They were too holy for God. I like the way Jason put that. Maybe that's where we get
Holier
than
than
thou.
I thought that was always just talking about like me to you.
Can
Like
it
where
be?
you're acting a little holier,
Yeah,
holier than
I
thou.
see that.
But it came from somewhere.
Do we have to have the answer for these? That's where I always struggle with.
Well,
these. I
that's
have
always
great.
a-
Well, I think you all have broken
Oh, wait a
that
minute.
mold
You asked the
before.
question, and
Oh, yeah, I see.
I'm sitting here talking to you about whether or not
Okay.
this is such a twisted
Can you say the
program.
question again? Trying to figure out if you're trying to trick us with the question.
It's just, do people use an excuse that they're too holy for God? Is that in the Bible that people would use that excuse that they're too holy for God?
The easy answer seems like no, but that's such an odd thing that I almost feel like it's in there.
You know, this has happened regularly on this particular game show where we've all been suckered into something that sounds so odd, couldn't possibly be in there, and it was.
Well, I mean, how many times is it recorded in Scripture that, about people that are so, thick-headed, being stupid and stuff like that? I mean, I think that fits right in there.
So are we at one of those places where we're going to start talking concept now instead of?
Oh, I think it's a concept that because he's not giving us a verbatim phrase. So I think we're talking about the concept of it, basically.
I'm going to say in.
I am too.
This would require somebody to think they are
They don't
more
need God.
than God.
Yeah,
They
they don't
don't-
need God. Where I'm kind of thinking on this, and I'm going to say in as well.
You're not giving me that. Come on now, Johnny. You know this answer. You're not giving me that any help right
Only
there.
you would listen to the sermon.
I'm tired.
I cannot think of a
I'm
single
sorry,
place that it would be in there, but I feel like it's in.
I'm going with you guys because if there's safety in numbers,
You
then
failed when you stood on your own.
yeah. The last few times I've stood on my own, but you were with me on a couple of
know,
those. I had
You're
some
welcome.
company. Yeah.
You're welcome.
All right,
Uh-oh.
teach us, old rabbi.
Yeah. Is that an innie or an outie? I mean, oh wait. Our answer was it's in there.
Yes.
It's an innie.
So, actually, in Isaiah 65, it's talking about judgment and salvation. God says, I was ready to be sought by those who did not ask for me. I was ready to be found by those who did not seek me. I said, here I am, to a nation that was not called to be my people. I spread out my hands all the day long to a rebellious people who walk in a way that is not good, following their own deceiving devices, a people who provoke me to my face continually, sacrificing in gardens and making offerings on bricks, who sit in tombs and spend their night in secret places, who eat pig's flesh. So he's talking about Gentiles, and broth of tainted meat is in their vessels, who say, keep to yourself. This is them saying this to God. Do not come near me, for I am too holy for you.
Oh,
Wow.
snap.
They are a smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all day long. Behold, it is written before me, I will not keep silent, but I will repay. So, yeah, it's in there. So good that you guys knew that. But isn't it crazy that there would be people that would basically reject God because they think they're better than God? Which honestly, isn't that what our rebellion is? I mean, all rebellion is basically saying to God, I don't agree with you, so I'm gonna do it my way.
That's pretty bold to think that way.
Isn't it?
It really is.
I don't know that I ever thought that way, but I react that way.
Hey, here's a quick one. I'm not in charge, but I just thought a quick one in there. Pigskins. In the Bible or out? Any or outie? Pigskins.
Like a football? Or pork rinds?
That sounds like pork rinds.
What did I say? I said pigskins.
You said
no,
pigskin.
I meant pork rinds.
Okay.
And
There you go.
this is just real quick. It
I mean,
doesn't-
are we talking like, as we understand them now, fried pigskin?
well, I didn't go that deep.
Dude, I saw the other day in Kroger's, in the popcorn section, they have pork rinds that you put in a microwave. That's nasty.
I've seen that. But
Oh,
yeah,
my gosh.
Pork rinds don't need to come out of a
And
microwave.
see what they do.
Hey, listen, I brought that up because you just read it.
I know.
So they were sitting around eating pig flesh.
Yep.
And I thought, that's pork rinds.
Yep.
I'm going to do that on any outie some of these
There you
days.
go.
And I thought, I can't wait.
That's not pork rinds. Pork rinds are the skin.
Yeah.
Pig flesh.
Pig flesh is, your pork chops. That's the flesh, not the skin.
Oh, that's not the skin? Never mind. Just, we'll say outie then. Outie.
The meat of the matter.
Oh, that's good. Meat of the matter.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's good right
I like
there.
that.
Jason Riccardi with
right.
all those
Oh.
R's and I's.
My innie,
Or is it an alley?
Did you just give us
Well,
the
let's just go. I'm going in.
any? We're all in
female
agreement here.
angels in the Bible.
Say that again.
Female angels in the Bible.
Nope. Out. That's a confident no, by the way.
I like that. No, I like
We
the
like
confidence of that
to,
one.
we see precious moments and we see all the angels and we almost always see them as females.
Yes, that right.
Wait, you can't give the answer yet. We've got to.
I'm just asking, like, these are the things we see culturally.
we
So
got to contemplate.
Right.
female angels in the Bible, yes or no?
Nope.
Man, y'all are doing what I would do. You're not
Yep.
even letting us discuss it now.
Well, discuss it then, Koontz.
There's nothing mentioned that I know of.
Well, actually,
Of Michael,
Gabriel.
Gabriel.
well, now Michael can be used. That name can be used both ways,
Michelle.
No,
Yeah, but
they're all like girls
in the
named
original
Michael.
language,
they-
it's
They were messed up.
masculine.
They were messed up. Or they are messed up, the ones that use it the wrong way today. Anyway.
Well, so all I'm doing right here is getting a little time for the music to swell,
That's what I was
up.
trying to do. Nope.
But yeah.
Hey,
Well, I
I've
did
been
that
so
because he
wrong
did that.
for so long.
You're so happy.
I'm like, woo,
He's
touchdown.
like, I know this one.
Touchdown.
Oh man, H. I hope you're right.
I hope so, because I'm probably not.
Because I'm so happy for you that I know this.
I thought I'd lob a softball up there.
I
for you.
appreciate. Oh wow.
I can even reel it in right now, too. He's like, I'm going to burn them good.
No. There are no female.
We didn't get the
angels.
consensus, did we?
No, we never actually.
You guys
gave
all
it.
had a consensus.
Yeah.
Let's give it all at the same time. 2, 3.
No.
Audi. That's an Audi. But see, we thought. I mean, I got excited when you first started because you said my innie is, and I thought, oh yep, he slipped this time because I'm waiting on y'all to slip all the time.
Yeah. Well, we do that a lot.
Audi, yeah, that was
I'm
an
not
easy
as
one.
good at the innie-outie picking as like you
As
guys
answering
are.
them?
Oh, I'm terrible at
You
it.
guys are really good at them.
I think you've had some good ones in there.
Maybe. I don't know.
Volvo,
Accord.
yeah.
Yeah, he got that like that though.
Yeah, he
like I've
did.
not ever had one where people are like on the fence. Oh man, is that?
I think you've had a couple that required us to think about it a little bit, but I think I'm usually thinking more about are you up to something than whether or not it's actually real or
Just
not.
my face. I can't help it.
It's
Okay.
Okay, that was fun. We're going to take a break, come back and sing a great old hymn that means so much to so many and has for so many years. We'll be back.
Do it.
Oh, wow. What a great contestant and a fine sport today on Innie or Outie, America's almost favorite new game show. Study up, future guest people. You're next in the hot seat for Innie or Outie.
Eddie and Ray are friends. That's why Ray's walking his bike instead of riding home, so he can be with his friend Eddie. Carl is not a friend. He lives in the same neighborhood, but he hasn't made friends with the others. Here's Jane. She's a friend. And guess what? She's going home to make some fudge. And she's inviting the fellows to come over later and sample it. Yes, sir, friendships are worth having, aren't they? Carl isn't in on the fun. Maybe he's just not the friendly sort. What do you think? When it's so much fun to have a friend and be a friend, why is it some people are not friends? Wouldn't it be more fun to have more friends? We all have fun with our own friends. But what about other people? Mightn't they be fun? After all, we're all strangers till we make friends. Yes, friendships are worth having. At home, at school, wherever we are, it's fun to be with our friends. And Ray has learned lots of ways to be friendly. Would Carl make a good friend? It isn't hard to find out. Try saying something, anything. Something to break the ice. No, it isn't hard to start a new friendship. And it isn't hard to be generous. And it isn't hard to be courteous. And you never can tell just how much a new friendship is going to mean to you.
Well, you know, a couple weeks ago I met a new friend, Carl. Well, it turns out he can play the piano. Really play it. I didn't know a kid could play like that. And they had him do a whole radio program. He asked some of us to go with him. Then we sat right in the studio with him. You'd have thought he was my own brother or something. And you know, I think it meant a lot to him. Anyway, I guess it proves that you've been trying to tell me about Billy. It makes everything, buddy, doesn't it?
Yes, friendships are worth having. At home, at school, wherever we are, it's fun to be with our friends.
You know what it's like when you get a long-winded preacher,
I do.
I'm right
Yeah.
here.
and and you're sitting there and your stomach's growling,
I do.
and the football game starts pretty close to right at noon, and they just keep talking, and they keep talking, and they keep talking. Well, the last thing you want to happen in that situation is the music director to stand up there and sing a hymn and demand that you sing all three verses, all the choruses, let them play their instrumental in the middle of it, and you're just wanting to go home and eat and watch football. You know how you know that feeling?
Is Miss Rosenbaum, what's her name? Was she on the piano?
Louise Hollaball.
Hollaball, was she playing?
When that last, you know, them last 38
Ivories.
tinkly notes, and you're just on the edge of your seat going, man, kickoff, chicken, I gotta.
As much as I loved Forrest McGregor, he had a habit of holding us hostage during the altar call.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, we're not like that on Mike the Baptist. We respect your time.
We've wasted enough of it.
So the last thing we want to do is beleaguer you with our musical talents. And some hymns, I got to tell you, some hymns are just appropriate, short, to the point, and you move on.
Plus, we don't want their interest to shrinkle in our program.
We do not want your interest shrinkling. This is a special request from Cousin Joe. Mm-hmm. Is it Alabama?
Alabama, Birmingham. Roll
Birmingham,
Tide.
Alabama.
Roll Tide, amen.
Yes. Cousin Joe, this hymn is for you, and to respect the fact that you may be watching this at lunchtime and you need to get to the football game, we're going to respectfully sing this brief hymn just for you and wish you well, buddy. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking, we gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. We're eastbound, just watch old bandit run. Roll on. Oh, it's a different song. Well, happy birthday, Joe, or whatever. What was it? This is a request, wasn't it?
Comments at MikeTheBaptist.com.
Comments at MikeTheBaptist.com. Thanks, everybody. See you next time real soon. We're just Christians.
Try not to cuss.
Amen.
The Baptist.